Okay, so to start this, we're gonna delete the cube. We're adding a cylinder mesh. We're scaling it on the z-axis to make it taller. And we're just gonna bring it up onto the plane. Bring it down a little bit. And we're going into edit mode. We are making some loop cuts here for the tops and the bottoms of the can. And I'm making another loop cut here to expand the top to make the metal rim. And just one more as well. So I'm making the metal rim here. Well, I'm redoing the loop cut here to make the metal rim. Now I'm just shrinking the bottom of the can. And I'm going to kind of push the can in on the bottom, like you see a little kind of spherical depression on the bottom of the can when you look at it. I turned on proportional editing for this part. And I'm just adjusting the depression on the bottom of the can. Now for this top portion, usually you see a tab on the top of the can. But since, since I'm just doing the front of the can for the final image, I'm not really going to work on the tab. Maybe in the future for can 2.0, I'll work on it and do a tutorial for that. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just kind of making the can shape without the tab on the top. Oh yeah, and I turned off proportional editing for the top of the can. Well, as you can see, I'm going to go back and turn off proportional editing. So I undid that, and I'm just pushing the top of the can down a little bit and scaling it. So that's our can shape. Now I'm trying to see what it looks like when we shade it smooth. It still looks a little wonky, so I'm going to add another loop cut to the top and to the bottom of the can. It's looking a little better now. I think what I do later in this tutorial is I add the subdivision surface after I add the label and everything. I think I'm going to see how subdivision surface looks first, like at whatever number of levels. I want to see how the can looks with the subdivision surface, and it looks a little better, but I don't want to add too much geometry just yet to the can because I have to add the label to it. But I'm liking the way it looks with the subdivision surface. So I just turned that off for the time being. Now I'm just going to add my own geometry by adding some loop cuts. I believe I'm going to fix the bottom of the can a bit. I'm just looking at the proportions of the can to see what I need to fix. So I'm adding a loop cut to the bottom and just fixing it. This kind of rounds out the bottom a bit. So I think that looks a little better. I saved my work. I'm renaming it the layer to can. And I want to add like a metal material to it to make the metal material. So I'm turning it down to a gray color. Turning down the roughness to get it really shiny. And I'm turning up the metallic property to get it to look like an aluminum can. And I'm saving my work. I also had another metal property earlier. They're pretty much the same. So I'm back in edit mode, and what I want to do here is make seams for the label. I tried to do a whole UV unwrap thing. I'm not sure if my can actually used UV unwrap. I was just able to add the image, but I'm sure it used the seams. I made like a whole label, which I'm going to add around the can. So I'm just marking the seams here, like the tops and bottoms of where the label should be, as well as like where the beginning and end of the rectangular label meet. And I'm marking the seam. And I'm saving my work. I did have a little difficulty with this portion, but I finally figured out how to add the label to the can. Like I made a separate layer called label, and then I added an image texture to it, and then I fixed the properties to make it look more metallic. But here you can see I'm just selecting all the faces. What I realized though, instead of selecting the faces this way, is you can just press L to select all linked faces with the seams, and that should work too. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I held shift and I selected the faces of the where the label should go. I was trying to make the label layer here, but what I realized is um, I had that little square on next to where it says can. There's a little square with a white highlighted pixel, and I had to turn that off. And I'll have to bring up a UV unwrapping screen. But I'm pretty sure I didn't use UV unwrap for for the label at the end. Like you can see where it's highlighted here and where I can import the image. That's the can label portion unwrapped. And I'm bringing in the PNG file that I made. It's a very basic label. Because we're only looking at the front of the can, I didn't add the calories or the ingredient informations or the summary to the label. It's just for the sake of this tutorial, I made the front portion of the label. Now, normally you're supposed to be able to see this on the can, but it'll work out. Now, I'm going into the other screen and I have to click Z and look at the rendered view to see if it shows up. Material preview. So yeah, it doesn't show. So I try to click off from the can. I have to make a new material called label. And let's see what option. I'm looking for UV in that option, but I didn't find it, so I'm going to go to image texture here. I'm going to search for that Bubbly Fizz can label again. It opened that. And then instead of repeat on the properties, you want it to be extended. I will change that property soon. As you can see, I really struggled with this portion. Now I'm trying to separate the layer and rename it label. So you press P to do that, and you separate it by selection. Now, what I can do, since the image texture is already uploaded there, I can assign it. That's what worked for me. At first here, I tried to go in the shading properties, and I tried to add a UV map box, and that did nothing for me. So if any of you have any suggestions, please comment below. But I did eventually figure it out, and you will see. Oh yeah, so as you can see, I changed that to extend from repeat. I just have to go to assign, which is very close to where the cursor is. There we go. So that's how I added the label. So I had to change the properties of the label, make it more metallic. Turn down the roughness so it's sparkly or shiny. And I think this was a little too metallic because you can't see the background of the label. So eventually I turn down or turn up the roughness so that you can see part of the background of the label. Right now, I'm trying to add an environment texture, which I got from polyhaven.com. I added that to make the lighting better. So, I turned down the metallic property so the background of the label shows a little more, but it still has a sheen to it. So my can for the most part is pretty much set for the image that I'm rendering. It's very, very shiny. Now, I'm just trying to add a backdrop to it, like a background. So I added a cube and I scaled it up, And I just have to delete the front face. It's almost like a little kind of light box. I scale up the backdrop and then I grab it on the Z axis to align it with the bottom of the can. Right now I'm just trying to bevel the edges of the background. It took me a few tries for this portion. So now I've beveled the edges of the background, and I just want to go into object mode and right click and shade it smooth. I renamed the layer BG for background. And I'm just playing around with the properties of the background to see what looks best. Or actually the properties of the label to see what looks best. I'm turning up the color of the base color of the metal part of the can so that it looks more realistic. And now I'm going to change the background color to blue, like a dark blue. I'm playing around with the metallic properties and the roughness to see what I like best for the background. Now I'm going to make the blueberry. I'm just adding a UV sphere. I'm grabbing the top vertices and pushing it in a little bit like you would see at the top of a blueberry while turning on proportional editing. I scroll my mouse wheel so that the proportional editing is smaller when I push in the top of the blueberry. And now I'm trying to shade the blueberry smooth and then add a circle for the top portion of the blueberry that has the little folds that go on each side. And I'm trying to make the fold part here with proportional editing, and I poke the face in the middle of the circle and then I grab the middle vertices. Now I'm grabbing the top vertices, and with proportional editing I'm trying to bend it downwards. I also have to work with the sides of the circle as well because they stretch out a bit, like if you look at it from other angles. But eventually it gets smoothed out and the shape gets, see, like right now it's a little stretched out, but with proportional editing I try to bring it in. Eventually the shape gets to what I want it to, which is almost like a Pringle shape. I'm trying to see what subdivision surface looks like on the top fold of the blueberry before I duplicate it a few times and put it around the top of the blueberry. I'm scaling it down. I turned off proportional editing. And now this portion I'm just going to be fixing the shape of this. If you don't want to watch this portion, feel free to fast forward through the video. This is just me putting the top folds on the blueberry, and eventually I add a solidify modifier. I add 4 folds, I solidify all 4 folds, and then I export it as a .obj object so I can bring it into my can tutorial Blender file. I'm just trying to see what shape goes best to make my blueberry. So I'm playing around with the angles of each fold on top of the blueberry. Seeing what it looks like shaded smooth. This here is called Z fighting. When a shape goes through another shape, you don't want that to appear in your final render. So you definitely want to move, that fold out of the way. On the bottom left of the screen, you can see what keys I press to do this. I'm just grabbing those with the G. Now I'm trying to solidify the fold. It's only solidifying one fold. I tried to highlight all of them, but it only solidified one. So what I'm going to do is solidify the one that it highlighted and then delete the other three and then place the folds again. You know, this is a lengthy process, but I am self-taught in Blender, and I am recapping as I used to do Blender as a hobby a few years ago, and my most realistic render was of a Clinique makeup bottle that I had just sitting around at home, and I decided to render it in 3D. But I can tell you my greatest influences on YouTube are Derek J. Elliott. His Blender tutorials helped me a lot, as well as Heavy Poly. His Blender tutorial for a soy sauce bottle was really helpful. The one that Derek J. Elliott that really helped me was his cosmetics tutorial and his wine bottle tutorial. That helped me to make my own renders eventually. I really highly suggest you check out those guys on YouTube. So that's Derek J. Elliott and Heavy Poly on YouTube, and subscribe to their channels. I'm still trying to make the shape of the blueberry here. So I try to group everything now and export this blueberry as an OBJ. And I'm gonna work on the color and the material in the can tutorial Blender file. Now I'm applying all the solidify modifiers. I'm applying a subdivision surface modifier, and I have to eventually export this as an OBJ file so I can import it into my CAN tutorial. Right now I'm saving it as the .obj file. Blueberry.obj. Alright, so back to the CAN tutorial. Now I'm going to import my blueberry. I gotta scale it down so it's relatively small in size compared to the CAN. And I'm making a new material called blueberry, where I'm going to add a color ramp, which is like a gradient, and I'm going to add a sky texture and a noise texture to make the sort of the darker spots of the blueberry. So that's my color ramp, and now I'm adding a sky texture. This one's called Preetham. And now I'm adding a noise texture. And I'm just playing around with the scale of the noise texture. That adds the light and dark spots of the blueberry. So the noise texture, I think, is the most important portion. See, you can see the subtle difference in the color of the blueberry. I have to add that blueberry color that I'm making right now to the top parts of the blueberry. So I'm adding that blueberry color property I just made to the top part of the blueberry. Not sure what happened there, but I just pressed Command Z to undo that silvery color that came up. Now I'm going to duplicate the blueberry a few times, resize the other blueberries, and kind of rotate them and set them in the scene. If you guys have any suggestions on how to group all parts of the blueberry together before selecting it, please let me know. I am relearning and still new to Blender as well. So I'm adding another blueberry to the background. I'm holding shift to select all parts of the blueberry again, duplicating the blueberry and kind of rotating it and resizing it to set it up in the scene. Saving my work by pressing Command S. Now I'm adding one more blueberry. I'm just playing around with the background color again. I like the darker color better. I don't think the background needs a subdivision service because it's creating these weird, like, ridges on the back. So I turned off subdivision surface for the backdrop. So now I'm going to add water droplets to the top of the can. So I do this by adding a UV sphere, kind of bringing it to the side, shading it smooth, shrinking it down, and in the materials panel I make a new material called water droplet. And I'm trying with a glass BSDF surface because glass almost looks like water. I'm turning down the roughness so it's very clear. And I'm changing the blend mode to alpha blend so that it's transparent. I think a roughness of 0 looks best. I don't think a blue droplet looks great. So it has to be, well, it has to be the color white so that it appears transparent. You can see the HDRI background in the droplet. Still checking out the properties here. I think glass looks better than diffuse. Going to try the option Beckman. And now I'm adding a particle system to the can, to the label, and it says it's hair, but what you can do is you can add that water droplet as the particle. So these are all the properties that I work with. I'm turning this to a normal so that all the droplets face forward and like the way they were aligned when I made the one droplet. And now in under the render panel, you want to render it as object and you want to select that sphere for with the water droplet color that we just made. And now I'm playing around with the randomization and orientation of the droplets so that it it looks a little more natural. I'm turning down the number and emission. And Yeah, I definitely want these to be randomized. You don't want them to be aligned like straight across like a grid because water doesn't flow that way in real life. I think that looks pretty good. And now I'm just increasing the size of the water droplets. I think that looks good. I made the instances real, and I'm deleting the one sphere that we used to make all the water droplets. Now we're going to set up the camera view. Now in the camera properties, you want to, under view, the view tab, you want to click camera to view. And then in the image output properties, I want to make it a square, not a rectangle. So I'm doing 1920 by 1920 pixels. And now I'm just trying to capture the best image possible. To capture an image, you would just click render, which is at the top left of the screen. Right now I'm just aligning the camera and seeing what angle looks best. I'm rendering it here just to see what it looks like. And guys, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial.